My sister said it in front of 7 people. My grandmother. My aunt. 2 cousins. Her boyfriend. And both of my parents. She looked straight at me across the dinner table and said, "Emma has always been the easy one. Which means she's the one who can afford to give something up." Nobody corrected her. Nobody even flinched. My name is Emma. I am 20 years old. And what my family took from me in one afternoon took them exactly 7 days to regret. Let me tell you what they took. I had a full scholarship to Penn State. $31,500 per year. Tuition. Housing. Everything. I had built that scholarship from nothing, no tutoring, no connections, no family money behind me. Just 4 years of staying up past midnight, teaching myself things nobody in my house had the vocabulary to explain. I had earned it completely alone. And I had kept it secret for 4 days after the letter arrived, because I wanted to hold it privately before the world touched it. When I finally told my parents, my mother hugged me. My father said he was proud. My sister looked up from her phone and said, "Penn State is kind of far." I smiled. I let it go. That was my first mistake. Here is what was happening behind my back. My sister Vanessa, 5 years older, always the favorite, always the one the family organized itself around, had been running the creative side of my parents' small clothing shop, Hartley Stitch, for 2 years. No budget limit. No oversight. No accountability. She had signed vendor contracts in the business name without permission. She had hired a marketing agency, put down a deposit on a studio space, and ordered $58,700 worth of fabric and equipment, all on my parents' business and personal credit. 2 vendors had sent collection notices. 1 had retained an attorney. The business account had $3,100 left. And my parents had found my scholarship paperwork on my desk. So they made a decision. Without telling me. Without asking me. They contacted Penn State, submitted a withdrawal request as my legal guardians, redirected my $31,500 first-year disbursement to cover Vanessa's debt, and deferred my enrollment to the next admissions cycle. I found out from a Penn State housing coordinator who called to confirm my room assignment. She said there had been a withdrawal request. I asked her to repeat it. She did. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened to the kitchen faucet dripping down the hall, and did not move for a very long time. I waited until dinner. I made the food. I set the table. I sat down. I asked my parents quietly whether either of them had contacted Penn State. 4 seconds of silence. Then my mother said yes. I said that money was mine. My mother said, "You're young. You can reapply. Vanessa has real obligations now." My father said, "1 year at community college and you transfer. This is not the end of the world." I looked at my sister. She looked back at me with an expression she had clearly rehearsed, something between guilt and certainty. She said, "The family needed it, Emma. You would have done the same." That sentence. That one sentence. Not my parents. I had watched them choose Vanessa for 20 years. It was my sister's voice, completely calm, telling me that what had been stolen from me was hers to authorize. That she had known. That she had allowed it. That she felt no shame because she had already decided I was a resource, not a person. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I said, "What you did was theft." I walked to my room. I closed the door. I did not cry in front of them. I want to be clear about that. But alone in the dark, sitting on the edge of my bed with the scholarship letter on my desk, and the sound of my family watching television in the next room, I cried then. Not for long. Maybe 10 minutes. And then something shifted. Not anger. Something colder and more useful than anger. Clarity. I texted my grandmother. 3 sentences. She responded immediately, Come here tonight. My mother knocked on my door and said I was being dramatic. My father said real family meant sacrifice. Vanessa said nothing. I packed a bag. I came out. My mother said, if you walk out that door, don't expect us to come after you. I walked out. Now here is where the story changes. My grandmother's apartment had a fold-out couch, and a quiet I had forgotten was possible. The first night I emailed Ms. Patricia Osei, my high school computer science teacher, the woman who had written my Penn State recommendation letter, and who had told me more than once that if I ever needed anything to call. I told her exactly what happened. Dates. Amounts. Names. No emotion. Just facts. She responded before 7 a.m. She had 2 contacts. A remote UX research firm in Boston hiring junior contractors. A tech nonprofit with paid fellowship positions. She sent my portfolio to both that same morning. While I waited, I called Penn State's financial aid office. A coordinator named Mr. David Chung told me there was a formal dispute process. I would need an affidavit, my original award documentation, and transaction records. I filed everything on day 3. I also called my grandmother's attorney, Carol Feynman, who told me plainly, redirecting a scholarship disbursement in a student's name without their consent could constitute financial fraud. She said, get the bank records. But here is what I did not have to do because the truth about Vanessa was already coming apart on its own. On day 4, my aunt called my grandmother. Vanessa had borrowed $6,500 from her 14 months ago, claiming it was for Hartley's stitch. Never mentioned again. A family friend had the same story. 2,000, same excuse. Same silence. And one of the vendors had discovered that Vanessa had signed contracts under a slightly modified version of the business name, listing herself as sole owner, a separate legal liability my parents knew nothing about. Debt collectors came to the house twice. Relatives started calling. A group family call happened without me. My parents found out in one afternoon what Vanessa had actually been doing, not just with the business, but with people who trusted her. The family they had protected her to save was the same family she had been quietly dismantling for 2 years. On day 5, the firm in Boston offered me a junior contractor position. Remote. $48,000 annually. I accepted within the hour. On day 6, Mr. Chung emailed me. The Penn State Scholarship Committee had reviewed my dispute. They had voted to reinstate my award in full. My enrollment for fall semester was confirmed. I read it once. Then again. Outside my grandmother's window a wind chime moved in the breeze. I sat and listened to it and felt something I do not have a precise word for, not victory, not relief. Something more like arriving somewhere you always knew you were going. On the morning of day 7, someone knocked at my grandmother's door. My grandmother opened it. My parents were standing in the hallway. My mother's eyes were swollen. My father was holding his jacket in his hands, not wearing it, just holding it like he didn't know what to do with his hands. And behind them, slightly to the side, not quite meeting anyone's eyes, was Vanessa. My grandmother looked at me across the room. She said, "Emma, you want to come to the door?" I walked over. My mother said, "Please come home. We need you." I said, "What do you need?" My father said collectors had come twice. That relatives had confronted them. That a vendor's attorney had sent a letter. That they didn't know how to handle any of it. That I was the only one who had ever known how to handle things. I looked at Vanessa. For the first time since I had walked out, she looked back at me. No rehearsed expression this time. Just a face that finally understood the distance between us. I said, "You took $31,500 that was mine. You made that decision without telling me. When I said it was wrong, you called me selfish and watched me leave." I did not raise my voice. "I am not coming home to clean this up. That is not what I am for." My mother started crying. My father said my name. I said, I got my scholarship back. I have a job. I start at Penn State in September. I am going to be fine. I gave my father Carol Feynman's number. I told him the vendors would likely negotiate with a structured payment plan. I told them Vanessa's personal debts were hers alone to resolve. Then I closed the door. Vanessa moved out 4 months later. She repaid nothing. My parents settled 3 of the 4 vendor debts over the following year. Hartley Stitch closed in October. My mother called me once. She did not apologize. She said she was glad I was okay. I said I was. We spoke for 11 minutes. My aunt called separately. She said she was proud of me. It landed differently than most things do. I am 20 years old. I live in a small apartment with eastern light and a faucet that does not drip. I work 4 days a week. I start classes in September. I am learning things that have no name in the house I grew up in. What I lost was the version of myself that confused loyalty with love. What I gained was the knowledge that I had been building my foundation for years without realizing that was what I was doing. Some people will give you a role in their story. The one who absorbs. The one who sacrifices. The one who can afford to lose. And they will call it family when they take and selfishness when you refuse. I was not the golden child. I was the one who built something real. And that was always enough.